No matter what qualifications you hold, even you are as susceptible to the risks of comparing your life to others and feeling like you're less than or not doing enough. And what I've realized is that everyone has an inside story, a battle they are fighting that we know nothing about. And comparison makes you blind to your blessings.
Welcome to the We Are Powerful podcast, celebrating the people and teams who make the changes in themselves to transform the results for others in the organisations and communities they are part of. I'm James Russell, an organisational change consultant and coach.
Hi everyone, my name is Alex Sellers. I'm the founder of Blue Heron Training. We're on a mission to help people and improve cultures wherever we go.
So look, we're going to be talking to some truly inspiring people with powerful stories to tell. So tune in, subscribe, to make sure you get alerts when new episodes are released. So this week I am talking to the inspirational Neelu Agarwal. I met Neelu at the November 2025 business show. She was talking passionately about how exactly to build belonging and psychological safety at work and how flourishing cultures become unstoppable. I thought, well, she's a seasoned presenter. I'm going to have to get her onto the podcast. So thank you, Neelu, for giving up your time and joining the podcast.
No, not at all. Thank you so much, James, for this platform and this safe space to talk about my experience. And I really hope that the audience gets some value from it.
Well, you were inspirational when you were talking at the business show. So it would be great to hear some of your life story and some of your experiences. Neelu, just for listeners who maybe don't know you, could you just give a bit of background to who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. So, hello, everyone. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm currently an executive director for EMEA Inclusion at a US investment bank. It's a global bank. My role at the moment is to be the single point of strategic cohesion, tackling all our regulatory, legislative, obligatory demands on inclusion, and at the same time, overseeing the target operating model and all our inclusion activities across employee resource networks, inclusion council, mental health in EMEA. In terms of my background, interestingly, I don't have a background in inclusion as such. I started my career about 16 years ago with S&P Global in India, where I'm from. As a corporate rating analyst, I've done my master's in finance, and I was there for about 6 years. Got married, moved to London, and my first job in London was not a very good experience from the perspective of confidence, from the perspective of building a sense of self when you move to a new country. And I think that was the first seed that was planted in me on the importance of inclusion because I saw a completely different version of me, someone who was so confident back home, to seeing somebody who was entering rooms shrinking, entering rooms apologizing for my presence. That was a moment of realization that your environment is so crucial in deciding your sense of self, in determining how ambitious you feel, how well you feel about yourself, and how you show up, how you walk. Luckily, I think I parted ways with the organization on a healthy note. And then the best thing happened to me, which is that I joined the Bank of England about 10 years ago, got an incredibly interesting role, did lots of different things within the bank. First 6 years, it was all about regulatory changes, policy making, new bank licensing, leading the communications and inquiries team for the PRA, the Prudential Regulation Authority. I then went on to also see the other side of banking, the resolution unit, to see what happens when a bank fails. So, really proud of all the technical learnings that the bank gave me. But it was during my maternity leave in the first lockdown of COVID when I was in postnatal depression. I realized that I don't care so much about the bank's failing, but I do care about the bank failing its people. And it was a moment of, sudden awakening and realization that I would not want to go back to those business roles that I was so mad keen on. I felt like my purpose was all about safeguarding heart counts, giving people a safe space where confidence felt accessible, human, simple, where they just felt that they had an environment to feel safe, valued, respected, and to educate people on how to create that environment for others. And serendipity happened. The first role got created within the Bank of England to be the lead for the Prudential Regulation Authority on this topic. I applied for it, got the job. And in hindsight, all those lived experiences, which felt very daunting, challenging, heartbreaking in the past, were the lived experiences that gave me my renewed purpose. So that's about my background. But on a more light note, I am also a certified happiness coach from the Berkeley Institute of Wellbeing, California, and I love Bollywood dancing.
Wow, what a journey. I have a feeling that we will go into some more detail on some of those specifics. But after your business show, there was a post that I read from you on LinkedIn, and
Mhm.
there was a quote in here which I was intrigued about. And I thought there's got to be a bit more behind this. So I'm just going to read the quote, and it'd
Yeah,
be great if you could explain a bit more about what maybe's behind this. So the quote you said was, because every one of us is someone's precious child with dreams,
hmm,
doubts, and dignity. And
yeah.
the way we are made to feel in those micro moments through verbal and non-verbal cues at work truly matters. And now that you've just given your intro and talked about creating safe spaces for people and how you felt going into some of those rooms when you came to the UK, I think I can see what was behind that quote.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's one of my favorite quotes, and I think it simplifies the purpose of inclusion, to be honest. And it all comes from my lived experience. I just realized that the depth of a negative memory is more hardwired in us, not because it's more true, but because it's more repeated in our heads. And what happens is that
Mm.
when you feel vulnerable, those negative memories and its depth stays with you at a 10x rate. By vulnerability, I mean the time when I was moving countries and I was not sure of my accent. I wasn't confident of my grammar. I wasn't sure if I was understanding the local accent. I wasn't sure how to enter conversations. I didn't know the context of what people were talking about. I wasn't confident when I was making presentations to senior stakeholders. I almost questioned and second guessed every version of me, every part of me, dismissing the experience I got to the table, dismissing the fact that I was brilliant in academics in India. And I kind of just disregarded and kept all that aside and chose to believe that I'm not good enough. I'm less than the people here. And when you feel vulnerable, everything that you observe in people in those micro behaviors defines your sense of self. You start magnifying everything in your head as if you're issuing a license to everybody to judge you and create a perception about you. Every dismissive glance, every time somebody doesn't respond to your comment in the chat box or speaks over you in a meeting, they might be doing these things completely unintentionally, totally unaware of how it's impacting you. But when you process it as a collective, as a series of different incidents happening at different points in time, but as a collective, it can really impact your sense of self and confidence. And I think that's what happened to me. And when I grew into becoming a mother, I realized how worried I used to be when he would go to nursery. And I would always tell the teachers, take care of him. And when I would pick him up, the teachers would assure me that he was fine. And that just brought home the realization that every person at work is someone's precious child. And if we could just treat them like that, knowing that they have dreams, doubt, and dignity, regardless of where they come from, regardless of their background, regardless of the privileges or the lack of that they carry, uh, the world will be such a good place if we just remember that, okay, let's not judge people because this person is someone's precious child who has dreams, who has hopes, who has dignity, and who is probably suffering with self doubt, which I don't have access to. I may look at my inside story and compare it to somebody else's outside story, not realizing that even they have an inside story. Somebody who is looking at my life today might think that, oh, she's an executive director, she's had it all, she must be, she's doing so well. But they don't have access to the inner chatter that I have before meetings and presentations of self doubt. So I think that's how I would like to look at it.
And we spoke to Tyler Lowe last episode, and he talked about just seeing people. And what you just said really resonates with what he said around just seeing, taking a moment. It's not even taking the time, it's just taking that moment to see someone for who they are, really
Absolutely.
let them feel seen. And then it's respecting who they are, what they bring, and controlling any preconceptions or assumptions that we might have about someone, allowing that space for that person to really show their true self.
100% agree.
I just want to go back something that you said there. You talked about the the depth of a negative memory, and it's hardwired and
Yeah.
it's amplified 10x, and what you experienced around dismissing your core skills and those feelings of not good enough or less than, and you said something earlier around seeing that seeing yourself shrink when you came into a room and
Yeah.
recognizing how big an impact the environment has. This is not a simple answer, so forgive me for asking the question, but
No,
I know it's one that others will love to get your perspective
yeah.
on. But how have you managed to, I don't want to say overcome those things. I don't know where you are with how you manage those things,
Mm-hmm.
but how
Hmm.
to some. I said to some colleagues a couple of weeks ago when something happened, and I said, "Look, do you want that to define you? Do you want what that person said to be the thing that defines you?" And they kind of
Yeah.
shot me a look as if to say, "No, but James, it's really hard for you just to say, just let it go." And I think some of us, including me, can underestimate how hard it is for some people to not let some of those sticks and
Yeah.
stones and words
Yeah.
define us.
Yeah, no, that's a beautiful question, James. Just to give you and the audience some context and some practical examples of how I overcame to a degree my insecurities and the negative mindsets I was carrying. I grew up with a very poor self-esteem and very low confidence, never feeling pretty enough. I was very mediocre in my studies until I was about 14. I have an elder sister who is incredibly beautiful, extremely talented in studies. And I felt like I was always in the shadow, always seen as like, you know, b- as someone who people didn't have much expectations of. And it's so interesting now in hindsight when I realize that it was my choice to let their perceptions or feelings define who I thought of myself. It was a choice. I could easily disregard it and say that, no, this is not who I am, and I'm going to become whoever I want to become, and you cannot restrict my abilities and my potential. But I think I just chose and allowed people to impose their feelings of how they saw my potential, my sense of self, and just drive my career and my life accordingly. And because I believed at some level that I was mediocre, I wasn't good enough, I made those choices of behaving like a mediocre person who wouldn't invest in her growth, who wouldn't invest in her health, who wouldn't invest in her confidence, who wouldn't invest in her communication. And then life was just responding to how I was behaving. I wasn't getting opportunities. And I continued to be in that trap. I got really helped, to be honest. And I'm really grateful to the divine force, which led me to change my subjects in high school. I had chosen maths, and I'm sharing this history because it's the most powerful story of my life and career. Because from being someone who was very mediocre, I moved from maths and all those science related subjects to business studies. And I thrived like never before. I consistently was the first rank holder. I became the gold medalist in the university. And somehow it just suited me. And that was again, like now that I have words to define it, I understand that it was about me getting the environment where I thrive, me getting the subject and topic where I thrive. But I sometimes wonder if I hadn't gone into business studies, I would have continued to just ride on that mediocrity for the rest of my life. So I think that's the number one. If somebody is feeling low, mediocre, not believing in themselves, I would really like to ask them that, assess what your environment is like and ask yourself, what is it that makes you feel less than? Be very, very open about your insecurities and see what is it that you can eliminate from your life, which helps you get closer to your goals. Sometimes it could be people. Sometimes it could be friends who are making you feel less than. And I took some hard decisions to eliminate those people from my life and limit my exposure to those people who would just make me return feeling less about myself. Um, Sometimes when you're so keen on achieving your goal, all you want to do is more and more, not realizing that it's not about doing more, it's about just eliminating what you're doing at the moment, which I think that's the number one. Number two, I want to share a story of my year, which is very inspiring in my view. And I hope that the audience feels empowered with it. When I was in postnatal depression during my maternity leave, first lockdown of COVID, I was very clear in my head that I wanted to take 12 months off, but I was also sensing a lot of FOMO. I wanted to make sure that my learning and my network was alive, that I was able to think like a corporate woman. I was somehow very worried that a 1 year break would just make me feel very underconfident when I would return to work. And it just occurred to me that, why don't I make a cold call to somebody on LinkedIn and say that I'm on maternity leave and I've seen your profile. and I want to interview you for my networking and learning. And let's see where that takes me. Luckily, the first woman that I began with, she had an excellent profile, really senior figure, and she was so forthcoming and so lovely and welcoming in the conversation. She shared about her career story, about challenges at work, about examples of influencing at work. And she said, "Why don't I give you another person to talk to?" And in this way, James, I ended up speaking to about 15 women in my maternity leave, and I created a network out of nowhere with very senior, influential women who actually then came to my rescue when I was applying for that job for the PRA, because I didn't have an inclusion background at that point. I completely came from a business background, but they did mock interviews with me, and they were the ones who helped me scope my answers and reframe my answers in the most strategic lens. Because sometimes the distance and the difference between where you are and where you want to be is not your capability, it's your language gap, the phrases gap, it's your body language gap, it's how you are carrying yourself. It's just bridging that perception gap, right? Which can happen through good communication. And I'm so proud that I took that one baby step. I didn't take that step with a perspective of knowing that they're going to help me in an interview, but that is how it all came together. That's what I would tell people, that, take baby steps towards whatever that's making you feel insecure. I think I was very insecure about my weight at some point, about my looks at some point, and I did work on my weight and my looks, and it really helps you feel more confident. Don't dismiss that inner chatter which tells you secretly and quietly, like, I don't think you're looking good enough. I don't think your communication is strong enough. And just taking baby steps towards addressing it has helped me in my journey. It doesn't have to be a very big step, but it has to be done consistently. And it has to be a step which demonstrates to the universe that I'm serious about my goal. And when you do that, your journey, your life can become unrecognizable. That's been my truth.
I mean, that's really moving, Neelu. And as you were talking, it reminded me of the power of what counseling and coaching can do to help people, help us.
Yeah,
Just naming it, as you said, you may feel those insecurities or have that self doubt, and a really important step is naming it. And then I love what you went on to talk about, just those baby steps, getting that support network, and actually one thing leads onto another, and then you've got yourself an interview with the PRA.
indeed. And a very recent example I'll give you of that baby step. There was somebody who I had reached out to during maternity leave as a cold call. He was working in the cabinet office at the time, and he said that, yes, I'm happy to have a chat. And he didn't turn up for the chat. And I was very upset and annoyed at that point because, organizing childcare for an hour to do that call when my son was 3 or 4 months old during COVID was a task. And 4 years later, when I went on to do, things at the Bank of England, he sent me a message to say that he was applying for a job there. And he apologized for not turning up for that conversation and that chat. And he told me that, he was going through something in his personal life or whatever. A part of me didn't want to guilt, but a part of me also felt like, I need to protect my values. I need to do the harder right than the easier wrong. And I did my bit to help him with whatever he needed to thrive in that interview. Um, and he got the job, of course, on his merit, but he was so grateful that he went on to then tell me that, how was it that I can help you? And just out of curiosity, I said that, you've got such a good job at the bank. Can I have a look at your CV for inspiration? And he shared his CV with me, and I really loved the format. And I had been applying for jobs and not getting much traction, to be honest. When I changed my format to kind of replicate his, that's how I started getting traction. I think a seed that I planted 4 years ago, which didn't give me dividends at that point, gave me dividends 4 years later. So I am also a big believer in just believing in the power of planting the seed. It may not give you results instantly, but it will give you results inevitably.
I love that. And I'm taking by inference, Neelu, that you suffered some rejections and what some might call failure, but call it what you want. You would have suffered some setbacks along the journey, I think.
Yeah, I think for the audience, I actually wanted James to plant this question. This was my request that he's planted the question, because I know that when I had just moved from India to London and I would look at people's LinkedIn profiles of those who were working here for a long time, it just felt like they were all cut from a different piece of cloth. Hopping companies every 2-3 years, getting promoted every 2-3 years, and I almost felt like I can never be like them, because LinkedIn doesn't flash your rejections, your failures, the number of emails you may have received from the recruiters saying that you've not been shortlisted for that interview, or the number of times interviewers or recruiters may have told you that, sorry, you were good, but we've gone with somebody else. And I remember when I was going through those rejections in my journey, when people were telling me, sorry, you don't have UK experience, we can't give you a job, I felt a lot of shame, as if there was something wrong with me. And at that point, I really wish somebody would have shared their vulnerabilities with me, that it's not that things were easy for them, for which their LinkedIn and their CVs looked as glowing as they do. People who are successful, people who you admire, people who you're inspired by, people whose profiles you want to replicate, have also gone through a lot of failures. The only difference is that they just look at the failure as data, as a point in time reflection, as more information to get better, and they just keep going instead of giving up. And hence, I really wanted to talk about this topic, that going through a huge number of rejections, when I wanted to go for promotions, or maybe go for lateral moves, or maybe apply externally, it was quite hard. There was a point where I felt a lot of stagnancy in my career. And that experience, though, taught me a lot about the concept of rejections. And I did want to leave the audience with 2, 3 insights which have been life changing for me. Because every time I went through those rejections, I felt like my life is over, my dream has not been achieved, and what could have I done more for the recruiter to be impressed with my profile, with my interview? I gave all the right answers, all the right examples. My CV is like to like, but I'm still not getting this. And what I realized was that sometimes when we apply for jobs, we we think that this is going to be a role where I'm going to be extremely happy with the subject. My stakeholders are going to be amazing. My manager is going to be the best manager. I'm going to get great opportunities to learn. But it's all an untested assumption. For all you know, you enter in a job, the division might get restructured, your manager might leave the job, you might end up in the hands of stakeholders who you don't enjoy working with. So you might get the job, but is it going to lead you to be happy? Not necessarily. So sometimes we need to also not be so sad about rejections, because whatever you were hoping to receive as a result of a selection is all an imagination in your head. And it has happened with me in the past, where I've cried over not getting certain jobs. And then I realized that people who got them were not happy either. And that's a very relieving mindset to have, that, would I be happy if I was to get the job 1 year from now? If not, then maybe there's no need for me to cry over it. The second thing that I've also realized is that when you get rejected, it's not probably because you're not good enough, but maybe because you are settling for less. And this has happened with me, where I have thought very strongly about wanting a certain role and really capping my ceiling at that role. And the universe has had bigger and better plans for me. And I've cried over not getting certain jobs, only to realize that, I was aiming for small. I wasn't playing to my potential. Um, so that's also something that people need to remember, that if you've done your bit, if you've been consistent in your effort, if you've had the discipline to put in the work, then trust the seeds that you've planted, trust the work that you've done. And of course, I will leave you with that, with a very standard line which everybody says, that rejection is redirection. That's definitely been my truth. And yeah, just want to say that, every person that you admire, respect, are inspired by, do remember that they have also gone through a lot of rejections. But don't stop, just keep going, keep showing up, and your dreams will definitely manifest.
Oh, I love that. And Neelu, I just want to go back to something when you were talking. It struck me. It struck me. Social media will try and lure us into the belief that other people's lives are perfect, and if we get into that very dangerous territory of comparing our lives to others and how we think it perhaps should be, it's a very unhealthy and dangerous place to go. And I'm just curious about the other thing you do is you're a happiness coach. So how do you square perhaps people's perception of, oh, I'm going to get coaching from Neelu and she's going to make me happy. How do you square that with the reality that life isn't perfect?
To be very honest with you, James, my coaching, I haven't launched myself as a professional coach as such. And I do a lot of this coaching in the form of informal mentoring and pro bono mentoring when people come to me as a
Hmm.
point in time, I'm in this situation and I need your help. And yes, sometimes they do expect, you to have all the answers. But what I've realized my job as a coach is not to fix people, but to love them while they fix themselves, is to make sure that they believe in themselves until they get the answers that they're looking for. It's to help unblock the barriers that are there in their own minds that's not helping them get the answers. And my personal belief around comparison, because no matter what coaching qualifications you hold, even you are as susceptible to the risks of comparing your life to others and feeling like you're less than or not doing enough. And what I've realized is that everyone has an inside story that we know nothing about, a battle they are fighting that we know nothing about. And comparison makes you blind to your blessings. I've come to not assuming, but even believing for that matter, that nobody has a perfect life. Somebody might be at the title which I am, dreaming to be at, but they might not have the best personal life. They may not have the time with their kids, which I can afford at this stage. They may not have a great mental health because of the stresses that come with that title and with the money that you're earning. So it's very important to know that at every point in life, you will always have something that somebody else doesn't have. And it's important to hold on to those core things as well. There's a very interesting story that I heard, James, which might be of interest to your audience. There was a person who was really keen to get that promotion and he was applying for jobs and comparing his career to his friends and his juniors. And he was feeling very less than because everybody had progressed and he hadn't, and told the divine that, why aren't you giving me the promotion that I really want? I've worked so hard. And the divine force said, can you just give me your left hand? If you give me your left hand, I'll give you the promotion. And he immediately went like, I'm sorry, I can't give you my hand for a promotion. And that was a sense of realization that you probably already have those crucial elements in your life which you need to be satisfied, to be content, and to keep going. And sometimes it's very easy for you to dismiss those things which you will never trade to get
Mm.
certain things that you're really longing to get and you're really crying over. That story I find really humbling. And whenever I am down and upset about not getting something, I just remind myself that maybe I have certain things in my life, which is probably a dream for others. And I should take some satisfaction, happiness from that. And those small thoughts keep you grounded and help you move on and move forward.
And I think that's a really important lesson, isn't it? It's those simple lessons of appreciating what we have and recognizing those things and not always looking for the next thing, because actually many sources of happiness lie all around us already.
Absolutely.
So, to Nilu, I'd like to explore a bit more about how you approach situations where you felt underestimated or when maybe you felt that people didn't believe in you or they made it quite obvious that they didn't believe in you. How did you approach those situations?
Yeah, to be honest, at that point when I was made to feel those things, and I would like to believe that people don't do these things intentionally, sometimes they are
Mm.
just speaking aloud or thinking aloud, or they don't have any idea of how their words, their glance, their body language is impacting you. Say, for example, if you're discussing your career with them and they're like, are you really sure you can do it? Are you really sure you want to do it? And they don't realize those four words just destruct somebody's confidence to put themselves forward for a job or to think that they can be in career accelerator roles or think that even I can make it big, even I can be an achiever. I think I used to give into those perceptions earlier and I would really dwell on it and I would dissect my own behavior as to what did I do that gave them the confidence that I cannot be there and really reflect. And I used to get into a very self critical mode, uh, trying to validate their feelings about me. But over a period of time, as I went on to do different jobs, it helped me understand that every time I wanted to try to do something different, I always had a group of people trying to tell me that oh no, that's not what they're looking for. I don't think you have what they're looking for. And most of the times I actually got the job for that very reason, because I had something which the team already didn't have. And taking those leap of faiths on my own caliber, not with the sense of belief that I would get the job, but with the sense of, you know, just trying to believe in my past experience, trying to believe in the discipline I bring to the table, in the work ethic that I bring to the table, trying to believe in the fact that I'm a quick learner and I can make a difference, led me to getting opportunities. And those small voluntary discomforts of putting yourself forward gave me dividends around overcoming those beliefs of underestimation. And I'm very proud to say today that my sense of self is 85% governed by the actions I take to overcome my insecurities or overcome my gaps than the insecurities people impose on me or the perceptions people impose on me. My locus of validation is very much intrinsically driven. I'm very much driven by my private victories. I do get a lot of sense of respect, not by the likes on the post of my LinkedIn, but the fact that I am choosing to be so disciplined that I'm keeping on with my content creation with a sense of discipline, that I'm taking out 30 minutes to listen to a podcast. I'm taking out time to read a book. I'm taking out time to invest in myself. And I think you can overcome those feelings of underestimation if you actively work towards making sure that you are giving evidence to your mind to build a sense of respect for yourself.
Mm.
So that's been my journey. I trust myself more today because I feel like Neelu knows that, okay, she's doing something to invest in her development. She's serious about her goals. She says she's into content creation, but she's not just thinking about it. She's in action mode about it. She says that she wants to be a speaker, but she's not just thinking about being a speaker. She took up the opportunity to give a keynote speech, which was daunting because she had never done this before. So I think when you overcome those discomforts which you have voluntarily taken, you can always say no to these things. I can always say, sorry, James, I'm not comfortable to be on a podcast. I'm not feeling confident. You know, you can always say no to these things, right?
Mm.
But if you take that up and if you're willing to look silly, if you're willing to look stupid because it's worth looking stupid for, it's worth looking silly for because it's going to give me confidence, then that's going to change the trajectory of your career and your life.
Yeah, and Neela, it reminds me of that saying, you know, when someone says, "Oh, you're so lucky," and there's that alternative perspective, which is no, you make your own luck. What you've just described there is that example and evidence of taking those small steps, but actually
Yeah.
being accountable, being responsible, taking the initiative yourself. Yes, you'll get those rejections and knockbacks and those insensitive comments. And I guess one of my final questions, Neelu, is I agree. I think an important message is it's about us taking responsibility for our own development and our own growth. What can we also do to support others? And you talked right at the start about creating the environment where we create a safe environment, and you also talked about educating people. I think inclusion can be a kind of a banner, and someone can say, "Oh, well, that's Neelu's job because she's director of inclusion." But actually, it's not just Neelu's role; it's all of our roles, it's all of our jobs. And
100%.
what advice would you give to people in organisations in life to also take care for creating that environment?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say to people, it comes back to the first question that you asked me, James, about treating people like they're someone's precious child. Managers in an organization have such a crucial role to play in how people return back to their families after work. When I have bad days at work, it affects how I show up in front of my son. It affects my sleep. It affects how I think about myself. And, it affects whether or not I'm going to speak up in meeting the next day. It affects the ideas I bring to the table. And being a leader myself, I realized that why would I ever want to create an environment, or why would I not want to do things which will help bring the 100% potential of my staff if I'm paying them for the 100% that they should bring? But if they're instead bringing in 60% or 40% because they are scared to speak up, or they feel that there's going to be a retaliation with new ideas, or if they can't share their vulnerabilities with me, which is what they need to do in the moment to thrive, then why shouldn't I learn that skill? Why shouldn't I learn how to talk to my staff, how to create that environment in which they can thrive, or what are the phrases that I can use to make sure that my words land in the way that I want them to land rather than being misinterpreted? And there are certain things that I try to do, which this is not a role where I'm managing a team directly, but in my previous leadership roles, I used to make it a point to seek feedback from my team members through growth conversations every 2 months, because I will never grow as a leader if I'm not creating a proactive, safe space for my team members to tell me where is it that I need to improve. And sometimes they wouldn't say anything. I know it's hard to give feedback, but the times when they did, it really helped boost the trust in our mutual relationship, because then I would tell them, okay, this is what I would do differently. And in the next growth conversation, I would tell them that this is what I did differently. Did you see that change in me? And that really builds a lot of respect and trust of your team and you as a manager, because you're not just there preaching them about how they can be better, but you're also taking that responsibility for yourself. The second thing is that, when I give them feedback, I would always tell them that, look, I get feedback too, and make sure that they don't feel lonely in that conversation. Because the moment I've told them that, look, I'm giving you feedback, but just know that even I've had a conversation with my manager, but I got feedback, we've all got something to improve on. It really relaxes the tension in the, small things like, introducing belonging related discussions in your team meetings. I would always have a slot in my team meeting to say, let's try to know a bit more about each other, with a question on what's the best decision we have taken in life, or when is the time when we felt embarrassed, or when is it that we felt most vulnerable, what are we proud to achieve in this year, or what goals are we looking forward to achieve. And I think when you take a moment to create proactive space to know the human behind the title of the people that you work with, to know their philosophies, their values, their vulnerabilities, their priorities, which you wouldn't get to know through an email exchange or through a project that you're working on. It really helps create that environment where people, vouch for each other, support each other, because you're not just looking at them from that one single pie of the email, but you see the entire pizza around them, like, okay, this
Mm.
person has so and so context in their life, around their parents, around their partners, around their kids, around the history of their education, or the goals that they have in life more widely, and you are less judgmental, but you are more empathic towards them. So I think these are the small things that we all can do to show up in a more authentic way, and in a way that creates that environment where people can thrive.
Yeah, I was with a group last week and we were exploring some of these themes, and we were talking about those interactions that happen at a social level and how important it is to just extend that conversation just to get sort of a level below that perfunctory, how are you, I'm fine, how are you, not bad, but actually just to sort of
Yeah,
really start to, it's not about being intruding, it's just, as we said at the beginning, it's showing that interest and
yeah,
showing a bit of care and respect so that, see and be seen. I think it's an important practice, and some of us have got lazy at it.
yeah, absolutely. And I would also want to caution that, sometimes with the best of intentions, some actions that you take with the best intentions, to create that sense of belonging with your team may land differently with some people. But it
Mm.
doesn't mean that you have to stop. Just make tweaks, give people an option. If some people are not comfortable talking about certain elements, then just say that, we've got an option between this question and that question, and feel free to not share if you're not comfortable doing so. Those were my lessons learned, because
Yeah.
sometimes you'll get a group who's very comfortable with your curiosity, and sometimes it may come across as pressure to share when they don't want to
Yes.
for others.
Yeah. No, really important. So, Neelu, just to finish, a question I ask everyone: if you go back to younger Neelu in India, what would you say to your younger self, knowing what you know now and what you've experienced?
I would say two things to her: that someone's opinion of you isn't the prediction of your reality, especially when it's not as good as you think of yourself. That's a very important thing to remember, that someone's opinion of you isn't the prediction of your reality, and that you can shape it with your consistency, with your discipline, with your tiny baby steps. And also tell her that just when you think you've exhausted all your options, remember you haven't. There's always some part of you, some version of you which you haven't tapped into yet. So don't give up. Don't give up, is what I would tell her.
I closed my eyes as I listened to that, Neelu, and that was it felt like a prayer. So thank you for that. Yeah, I'm kind of almost lost for words, and I should have said at the beginning that I'm missing Alex. So normally Alex would co-host on this, and he would jump in at these points. So but he can't be with us today. But if listeners want to find you, where can they find you?
You all can find me on LinkedIn by my name, Neelu Agarwal, Sparkle Happiness Coach. And I'm also a speaker. So if you would like me to come and speak on any topics on motivation, belonging, psychological safety, or stakeholder management or career development, I'm very happy to do so.
I think what we've explored today and what you've shared is a terrific advert for the experience and practical advice that you can give to many people out there. So thank you so much for sharing it on this podcast and with me. And I'd say to others, check out wearepowerful.org for more content and useful links. Get in touch with Neelu if you'd like her to come and share some of her thoughts and open up a discussion about some of those steps that you could take. Contact us via the website if you want to get involved in this podcast or anything else. And please pass this link on to others if you think that they would find it useful. So Neelu, thank you so much. It's been an uplifting and moving hour. So thank you.
Thank you so much, James, for the opportunity.